Hello, everyone, and welcome to kind of this panel on faith and LGBTQ for the Albert Kennedy Trust. So my name's Dev. I am 20-something years old. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, whether I'm near to 30 or near to 20, and I'm a comms executive. Originally from the Midlands, now moved to London to try and be a bit cooler, but I don't know if it's worked. And I'm a gay man, so my pronouns are he and him. So I'm just going to pass on now to our lovely panel, who are going to kind of introduce themselves, kind of who they work for and who they support, to give you a bit more detail. So Jide, if I can pass on to you.
Thank you so much. My name is Jide Macaulay. I'm the founder and CEO of House of Rainbow. I'm also an Anglican minister in the Church of England, and I'm also a volunteer chaplain at the Mad Mission Hospital. My organization started 13 years ago in my native country, Nigeria, and of course we continued the service here in 2010. And it's continued to grow. And I think the one thing I'll say in the introduction is that House of Rainbow focuses on supporting queer people of faith, reconciling faith and sexuality, and most especially people of color. And we've also looked at other areas of life like sexual health, asylum issues, and many other issues. Even with COVID-19, our work has increased.
Wonderful. Dalia, if I pass on to you.
Thanks. I'm Dalia Fleming. I'm the executive director of an education and training charity called KeshetUK. We work within the Jewish community, and we work with Jewish schools, youth movements, synagogues, and kind of communal organizations to help them become as inclusive to LGBT plus Jewish people as possible. So with schools, we go in and we talk to year 7s to year 13s, we do teacher training, and we try and work with people where they're at. So whether they be part of the Orthodox, Reform, Liberal, Masorti, or cross-communal organizations, we have a lot of chats with them, and then we work out how we can support them to make sure that LGBT plus Jewish people and their families get the experience that they're expecting to have.
Wonderful, thank you. Maryam, on to you.
Hi, I'm Maryam Din, so my pronouns are they, them. I identify as a queer, non-binary woman, and in terms of who I am, what I do, so I'm currently working in the student union sector, but furlough times at the moment, and I've actually gone back into care, so I'm doing ad hoc care shifts while everything's going on. I'm one of the co-founders of QTIPOC Notts, which is an LGBT group, support group for LGBTQ people of colour, based in and around Nottingham. And I'm also a bit of an activist, so like myself, to a bit of a writer too. So yeah, thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. So I'm going to kick this off now with a really simple question when it's written down, but actually I'm pretty sure it's quite complex when we kind of vocalize it. So Maryam, actually I'm going to start with you. So what does faith mean to you as a person?
This is so interesting. I feel like in my head I immediately go to there being a distinction between faith and religion. I think everyone has faith, irrespective of whether they may or may not have a religion or may not believe in God. But faith to me is a belief, a really strong held belief or conviction in anything. But it's interesting you ask that question now, because we're midway through Ramadan, which is the holy month in the Muslim calendar. And so many Muslims, if they're able to fast or observe Ramadan in different ways, even if they're not able to fast for whatever reason that may be. So faith right now feels very much about community and about awareness of God. That's how it feels right now. But I imagine that changes depending on where we are kind of in our own faith journey, if you like. But for me, that's what it means right now. I do feel like that's changing, and it's great that it changes too.
Thanks. Dalia, on to you.
Yeah, I think, in terms of like what my Judaism means to me, it means so many things. It means a relationship with food and my family and Torah and repetitive traditions and kind of culture. And I think right now what's interesting is how we do that like virtually. So, you know, I've been having kind of Shabbat candles with my mum and my cousins and my family, because I'm kind of like isolating on my own. But also we had the festival of Pesach, Passover, and doing kind of all the rituals around that, in some ways made it really special. And having to kind of do my first Passover Seder on my own. But I think for me, it really is a link to unity and also to history, in really complicated and ways. Yeah.
Wonderful. And finally, Jide, on to you.
And, you know, I think for me, faith means a lot of things. And I think the first thing as a Christian is that, you know, my faith is actually linked to my relationship with Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And it actually doesn't take anything away around my queerness. And faith is the ability to also walk with Christ and trust in God. There's another connection that I also would like to bring to my faith, is also my African upbringing as well. You know, this story is about my ancestors. You know, that is what a lot of Christians use in terms of saints and martyrs and things like that. And I think for me, it's really important. And I think that the one thing I also say is that my faith has a direct link with the development of my spirituality. And like Dalia said, you know, in the lockdown, many people are finding their faith in themselves, in their community, in their communion. Like this morning, I sat down in my home and I had prayer with many people, you know, because my faith, you know, in scriptures is that where two or more are gathered, virtually in this case, and it works. It's just such a beautiful thing.
So I think all three of you have kind of alluded to something really interesting here, that faith isn't mutually exclusive to religion. I think faith is about kind of culture and upbringing and ancestry as well. So that's a really powerful point. So kind of the next question is actually around, how did your faith kind of frame your acceptance around being LGBTQ? And actually, I'm going to start a little bit, because actually this is something that I struggled with when coming out, was actually my faith and my sexuality as a gay man at the time. And actually it weighed on me for quite a few years. And it wasn't until kind of my early 20s that I really kind of connected the two and was quite happy with it. So, and a lot of that was actually not down to my religion per se, but it was more down to some of the culture and some of the community aspects. So kind of putting that question to you guys now, and Jide, I'm going to go to you first, actually, just for fun.
Okay. Yeah. Honestly, I mean, I'll be pretty quick. I mean, this is it. Honestly, my faith has been very helpful. You know, the one thing is that I grew up in a very Christian environment, even though looking back, it's very conservative. But there is something that's so beautiful about being a nurtured Christian. You learn a lot about prayers. And, you know, when they talk about take it to the Lord in prayer, it's really about you taking yourself and those issues that you have, you know, to Jesus Christ and to God. You know, you plead, you ask, you know, you put a fleece out, you say, I will thank you if you do this for me. But let me tell you how it has helped me. When I came out as gay, I thought I was going to lose my faith in God. I did not. In fact, I became more stronger, because I didn't let my coming out strike me down. It was the reason that I picked myself up to go back to church. I just want to be part of the church community. The second thing I'll say this as well, because I think some people might be listening to it. Okay, 10 years after I came out as gay, I then was diagnosed with HIV. I thought, my God, you know, this is terrible. God hates me, and all that kind of thing. But no, my faith played a very important role in that moment, that God loved me just the way I am. And honestly, if you can just see behind me, this is a banner, you know, that we used to also share that message. God adores you, God affirms you, God accepts you. And these are the messages of faith.
Thank you. Dalia, on to you.
Yeah, I think it was really interesting, actually, because I grew up in kind of an Orthodox household, although my dad's a Holocaust survivor and has quite a secular identity. My mum was Orthodox. I went to an Orthodox Jewish secondary school. And I think I think at first, actually, I was just trying to find my place in general as a queer person, although I use the term not straight, as a womany type person. I was really trying to find like where I sit, and it wasn't always the most easy. But I actually think that because I am Jewish, there's no doubt about that. And at the time I was like, I'm not straight. There is no doubt in my mind about that. And so even though I didn't always know, particularly when I was younger, and I didn't have a Jewish LGBT plus community, and I didn't have those role models, I think because I knew who I was, even if I didn't always see how they related, knowing that actually was really helpful. Because in my mind, I felt like there was going to be a space somewhere. And then, I remember the first time I met an LGBT plus rabbi, and more of my friends started coming out. And I think there are different spaces within Judaism in which these conversations can be really hard, and the conversations aren't easy, and they're not simple, and you don't always get the answers that you want. But I actually think being able to hold on to knowing who I was and am, and then being able to talk to more people and seeing how different people relate to their Judaism in such different ways, whether that be by observing Torah and tradition, or whether that be by finding community, it really helped me. And then the more I was able to find my own space and think about how do I feel Shabbat, should be held, and how do I feel these can be held, actually really helped solidify the fun in all my identities, in a way that I think it took time, but it definitely helped stabilize me in many ways.
Thank you. And Maryam, on to you.
Yeah, sorry, remind me of the question again.
It's quite a complex one, actually. So how did your faith help you come to terms with your kind of LGBTQ identity?
Thank you. I feel like with a lot of LGBT people of faith, it's a journey, and it's a continuing journey. In the beginning, I really did think that I struggled with it. I struggled with it a lot, and I thought that I was kind of South Asian over here, and I thought I was Muslim over here. I didn't think that they could work together, and then it wasn't until I realized, maybe a few years later actually, that I am everything all at once, the various facets of my identity. And even if I might not understand how they interplay, certainly when I first came out about 10 years ago, even if I don't understand kind of the interplay together and how exactly they work together, they still are, because I exist in and of myself, and I think that was a really powerful moment for me. And as I've kind of grown older, and as I'm learning more and more about my religion, I'm realizing just how, even when it comes to kind of social justice activism, how ingrained that is within my religion. And that's something that really turns me on to Islam. At its core, Islam is about social justice. At its core, in the beginning, the Muslims were an oppressed minority, and it was about fighting for this group of people, and working, among other people who may not have always agreed with them, and kind of surrounding tribes and that kind of thing. And I think a core component of Islam, but also kind of the other Abrahamic religions, is the idea of liberation theology, and about God sitting really with the most kind of oppressed in society. And that's something that really resonates with me. When we look at the stories of the holy people in all of the religions, not just the Abrahamic ones, we find that they walked with the most marginalized in society. And I think that's important. Often I like to say, and make people a bit uncomfortable with this, at their core, I think religions are very socialist. And I think that's important in terms of what religions say about each other, but also kind of what they say about the state of society. And all of these different things and more speak to me about religion. So I think I wouldn't be who I am if it wasn't for my queerness, if it wasn't for my faith, and also how they interplay together. So it's been an interesting journey, actually, learning. When I was, I wrote a chapter for a book called Unorthodox, LGBT and Faith. And in that, I had no idea, but the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was a strong and avid supporter of kind of gender and sexual minorities, to the point in which he allowed trans people into his home. I had no idea of this. You know, we have this idea that Orthodox Islam is very straight-laced, it's very conservative with a lowercase c. But then actually, the more I learn about Islam, you know, even at the moment, the more surprised I am. But then I'm also not surprised because of its penchant for social justice.
Oh, lovely. And actually, you stole part of my next question there.
Right.
And actually, it's about faith and community. So I'm going to leave this open to anyone to answer. But is there kind of a rationale from separating your faith from your community? So we talked a little bit about Maryam, you being from a South Asian background there, and again myself, and from the Midlands, where it is densely populated with kind of our South Asian communities. For me, coming out I felt more pressure about what the community felt about me coming out rather than myself actually coming out at one point. And for me, in terms of my religion, I think when I came to terms with it, I think I was actually more comfortable with coming out and being a gay Hindu, but it was more about being gay South Asian. So for me, that's kind of where the community barriers are. Did any of you kind of feel the same, or did you have different experiences? The floor's open, so whoever wants to go first.
Well, I'll go. I feel that, you know, when you come out as gay, you almost immediately feel that you no longer belong, you know, to your faith community. And I think that is the danger that we face. When I first came out as gay, I struggled with reconciling my faith and my sexuality. So I took time to keep them apart, but it wasn't working because I have to have two sets of friends, you know, my gay friends and my Christian friends, until when I reconcile the two. So, I mean, for me, I do not believe that we can separate faith from community. It's part and part of the whole parcel. And I think that it would have been more better if the community actually take time to understand human sexuality, you know, from the perspective of the queer community themselves. And another quick example is that, you know, when I came out as gay, it separated myself and my siblings, you know, for many, many, many years. And, you know, when we started to talk about my sexuality, because, you know, my older brother said to me that, you know, they always loved me, but they didn't want to bring up the subject because they didn't know how to approach it. And you can tell that this is the time that we need counselors, we need people with experiences of pastoral care. And, you know, some of the things I would say is that, you know, the barrier that we face is actually the barrier that we've been taught, you know, that separated us, that alienated us from this amazing sacred text. And I like what Maryam said about, you know, transgender person in the presence of Muhammad. That is fantastic. I tell you one thing, I feel blessed just hearing that right now. And I think this is what we also need to share with others. We need to tell transgender people, you know, LGBT people, non-binary, non-conforming people that it is okay. And let me just drop one Bible text. It's Romans chapter 9, verse 26. It says, in the very place where it is said to them, you are not my people, there they shall be called children of the living God. I mean, there's a preamble to that as well, but that text itself is an affirmation that marginalized people will always have a home, even in the places that they're marginalized.
Well, thanks, Jide. Dalia, Maryam?
I think for me, I don't think you can truly healthily separate those two things out, your faith, your community, your sexuality, your gender identity. But I think sometimes we are forced to by society and by community, and sometimes that is the healthier of the two decisions, right? Being like, space, this is who I have to be right now, and in this space, this is who I have to be. But I don't think it's a truly healthy thing. And at KeshetUK, the reason that we say that we want to create a world where no one is forced to choose between their LGBT plus and Jewish identity is because there is a pressure there is a force. And I think that's something to really hold on to, that actually if at this moment in time you feel like this is who you have to be in a space and you're doing it for your own safety and your own well-being, that's okay, and like you should do what you need to do in that moment. But I think the moment that you realize that they can exist together, and I think within Judaism people have really different experiences. I didn't meet another LGBT plus Jewish adult until I was, I think, 19. Whereas other people in the community had LGBT plus rabbis in their life since birth. And it really varies. And I think that's something that's really important to hold on to, that whether you're in a community in which those role models have always existed or in a community in which they don't, that when you engage with someone who is Jewish and LGBT plus, even if you are Jewish yourself, that experience is really different. And that where they are at might be really different, and that you shouldn't assume those experiences about people. But I think it's definitely a barrier for some people when they feel like they can't put the two things together, whether because they've experienced some kind of anti-religion, anti-faith experiences in the LGBT community, which definitely happen, where people have either had awful experiences with organized religion or just don't understand it, and so they're really anti-faith, or from within your own faith community, and then it's easier just to be like, this is who I am here, and this is who I am here. But I don't think it's the healthiest decision, but sometimes it is a necessary one. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really interesting what you said about role models, Dalia, and I think that's something that resonates with me particularly at the moment. I think faith and community aren't things that you can separate, but I understand that need to, especially with my own journey, as I explained earlier, about not being able to find a space where I could just be me in my entirety without having to separate out parts of my identity or minimize myself in certain spaces. You know, an example of that will be, you know, if I'm with Muslim friends, I might, you know, kind of unconsciously downplay my queerness. You know, if I'm with queer friends, I might unconsciously or consciously downplay my Muslimness, my faith. But I think this last year, I appear to have found the holy grail of faith and community, and even more so during Ramadan. And what I mean by that is, you know, coming across, I mean, I've known groups like Iman and Inclusive Mosque Initiative for a long time, but because they're based in London, I haven't really been able to visit them, you know, as much as I'd like. And I seem to be describing COVID as almost a blessing in disguise based purely on this reasoning, because I'm accessing spaces and communities that ordinarily I wouldn't have had a chance to access, and that feels really special, actually. You know, Iman and the Inclusive Mosque Initiative are both kind of support religious-based groups for LGBT Muslims, and it feels really special being able to share Ramadan and fasting and religious ritual and that kind of thing in a safe space, in, you know, with like-minded people, and we can come exactly as we are. You know, when it comes to praying the Jummah prayer, the Friday prayer, the idea that women, non-binary, Black and people of colour, Muslims are prioritised almost feels mind-blowing to me, even though this is at the core of Islam in terms of that diversity. You know, when we go on pilgrimage, you see a vast diversity of, you know, Muslims around the world. I mean, there's 1 billion of us around the world. There isn't a singular idea of what it means to be Muslim, but I think sometimes we forget that, particularly when we're not portrayed in this way in mainstream media. So yeah, faith and community, it means a whole lot, actually, and I found myself becoming very moved during Ramadan. I mean, I'm quite an emotional and soft person anyway, so but definitely cried a lot more during Ramadan, especially after sessions with Iman and the Inclusive Mosque. It's just really special to be able to have like-minded people and a space where you don't have to minimize, you know, and being able to come exactly as you are is really special, and I'm really thankful for these groups and more groups that are out here doing the work. You know, I remember a couple of years ago when it was Pride season in Nottingham, and I noticed that this church had rainbow kind of signage around Pride, and I was just very confused because in my head I'm thinking it didn't say anything about kind of being LGBT. and Christian. It just had rainbow signage, and I thought, is that accidental? Is that on purpose? But it's Pride at the moment. I think it was Nottingham Pride that weekend, and I thought, I wasn't sure, and I think maybe that was my own kind of unconscious biases around, even as a person of faith, how I perceive kind of other faiths, or just one faith out here trying to be inclusive. And it turns out it wasn't accidental. It was very purposeful, because I saw them at Pride that weekend, and it was really beautiful, actually.
That's really, really good. So I excluded myself from the LGBT community and the South Asian community. So I was on my own in kind of cis straight groups, because I felt like I didn't fit into the other ones that I was part of. And actually, over the past 2 years, I've made friends from kind of South Asian LGBTQ groups, who've taught me differently, and I feel involved. And like, I go to Diwali celebrations with my community, and I'm openly gay. And if people ask, I will tell them. And I've not met anyone, luckily for me, who kind of turns their nose down at me or has something negative to say. It's just about living yourself. And even in LGBTQ groups, kind of, they respect my faith. They understand things, and they want to know things as well. So I think sometimes it's about educating both sides of the community as well, about the benefits. And I think that's something that which you guys have all talked about. And I think for me as well, it's about educating ourselves as well, kind of new terminology, new language, new context. And actually, it's something that you do learn something new every day. And I think it's really important that we continue to do so. So next bit, again, is a very personal question. And it's, what advice would you give to people who are struggling with their faith and their LGBTQ plus identity at the moment? So again, hard question. So I'm going to open it up to the floor, and whoever wants to go first, feel free.
You know, I'll jump this time. I mean, I think that just on the back of the last thing that you said, you know, yeah. I'll quickly address that. You know, the impact of accepting oneself is not always easy. I mean, even my own entire family are Christians. My father, for example, is still not accepting of me in any shape or form. He is also a religious leader like myself, but is non-accepting. And I've also found non-acceptance within the LGBT community. Some people have called me betrayal, a traitor, betrayal. For example, somebody has said that, you know, I'm a disgrace to the Black African culture because I'm embracing the colonizer's religion. Now, I mean, if you're going to discriminate against me for being Black, for being African, the last thing I expect is anyone to even discriminate against me for being a Christian. But Christians do that very well. Some Christians do that very well anyway. But I think that for me, you know, the advice that I would give to someone who feels that they have to make a choice between their faith and their sexuality is for them to actually be stronger. You know, find somebody who, I mean, a role model is important, because many at times we don't know people. And I think I like what Maryam said about knowing that there are Muslim groups in London, but not in Nottingham. And I think, to be honest, COVID-19 is both a blessing and a curse, to be honest. It has allowed me to meet all of you on this platform, for example. It has allowed me also to reach out to many more people. And, you know, before we started, I said that, you know, the work of my organization has gone up, honestly, about 20% up since COVID-19 started. So we need to make sure that there are services, I call them pastoral care, that are inclusive and affirming. You know, I think that, you know, God is everywhere for everybody. People just need to be able to have access, you know, to people that can help them, that can support them. And, you know, I don't want to repeat my colleagues, but I think that we're also open to various forms of interpretation as well. Even a couple of weeks ago, I was doing an online training on Zoom about what the Bible says in favor of same-sex relationship. I had somebody call me to say, can we have a different conversation about how I am wrong? But my take on that one was that I actually decided to shut them down and say, look, you read the materials that affirms same-sex relationship, then if you have questions, then we can address those questions, because it is time-consuming, it can zap your energy, and you don't want to do that. You know, sometimes people that we're speaking to, for example, right now, They want information in bite sizes. And that is important because little by little, they will also build their faith and their strength on reconciling their faith and their sexuality.
Thanks. Maryam?
So advice. It's going to start with a statement first, and that's going to be Allah loves you, you know, or whatever terminology you have for God or the high being. You're loved, and you're accepted, and you belong. Faith is something that belongs to all of us. You know, no one has ownership of it. No one person or group has control over it. One of the things I love about Islam is that when you pray, it's just you and God, you know, and I imagine it's like the same for other religions too. Sure, there's going to be more kind of learned people, you know, scholars, people who know more about the intricacies of religion, but ultimately it's you and God, you know, and I think that's really important. And it's really important sharing that with people. And feeling that kind of love and acceptance from people, I think, is really important. And it can be really hard, but knowing that my relationship, whether it wins or not, I feel like that happens to many people of faith, irrespective of kind of whether they're LGBTQ or not. And another kind of important reminder is that Allah or God or, you know, Yahweh doesn't make mistakes. I think that's really important, and really important to hear that. You know, we have this idea of we're being tested kind of continually throughout our lives, but the test isn't just for ourselves, it's for people around us and how they respond to us. You know, are they including us or are they ostracizing us? You know, religion for me isn't some exclusive, you know, club that only certain people can have a pass to. It belongs to each and every one of us. And so those are the things that I want to say. I want to say that no one can interfere with your relationship, with your faith, with your religion. And Allah created us exactly as we are, you know.
Thanks. Dalia?
Yeah, I think in terms of advice for someone who feels like they have to make a choice between their faith and their sexuality or their gender, is try to have as much patience as you can possibly have. I think it can feel really hard when you either are put or have to put yourself into spaces where you don't feel accepted, where you don't feel loved, you don't feel seen. But I have always found that both being patient and proactive, right, sitting down doing nothing doesn't have really helped. And I think if you can find 1-2 people that you feel that you can speak to and try and I'm a talker, I like to verbalize and like talk it out, and that knowing that the decision that you are making right now is most likely the decision that you need and is the best decision to be making. And if you have to do different things in the future, that's okay, and to try and be kind to yourself. A lot of the work that we do at KeshetUK is trying to encourage kinder conversations where even if the conversation is hard and even if the person you're speaking to isn't always saying the thing you want to say or you want to hear, to understand how can you have a conversation with kindness, and just have that patience to understand that you'll meet different people and new people in your life, and they will add such value and joy and kindness, and you will find that in so many different parts of your life and so many different parts of your faith, religion, and other communities that you are part of. And the acknowledging that things can suck is sometimes really helpful too. But knowing that actually with that patience and that proactivity of finding your family, right, biological or not, is really pretty amazing.
Thank you. And actually, we're just running out of time now for the end of this session, but we've had some really good thoughts here. We've had a really good conversation, and I've certainly learned a lot. I just wanted to end by asking you all if there's anything else you wanted to share. We've got kind of a variety of viewers watching this, but what would you like to say to them, if anything?
I can go just at the end of what Dalia said there. I think that, you know, queer people need to find a way to relearn, you know, their own path towards their faith and their spirituality and their religion. And I think one of the buzzwords with my journey of reconciling my faith and my sexuality is actually to unlearn the abuse and the hate that that I've grown around, and then begin to learn to love myself and be kind to myself. And if I was to leave a positive experience to anyone that's listening, I just want to say to them, you are not alone. You just need to find your tribe, find your family of choice. And I cannot emphasize the acronym GAY enough. God accepts you, God adores you, God affirms you. That's my message.
Thank you, Jide. I'm definitely going to nick that, so I hope you've not got it trademarked. Maryam, have you got anything else to add?
Oh, it's, you know, I can't resonate enough with what Judy and Dalia are saying, and it's so important, that self-love, that self-compassion, and self-care. We need to do more of that, you know, especially with everything going on at the moment in the world, but especially when it comes to, you know, LGBT people of faith. And it's just something that really resonates with me. I think I'm still in the mindset of, yes, it's really important to do, but how do I actually do it? You know, it's something that I'm still learning all of the time. And I wonder how many of us actually know really how to practice self-care, even how to practice self-love. Actually, do we know? And maybe that's something that we should all look into. I like words of affirmation, even towards myself, particularly when I'm struggling with something. That's something that I like. But in terms of something that I want to share, Dev, you said about a range of views that will be watching this. One of the things is going to be, there's two things actually. First is, don't shy away from topics that you may not know a lot about. Come with the language that you have. You know, I don't mind if people use outdated language. That's fine. We can totally have a conversation. And if words or phrases need updating, then that's a conversation that we can have. You know, this whole call out culture, I'm so over that. It's about calling people in, and as Dalia said, about kindness. And that's really important. So come with the language that you have. Secondly, it's going to be supporting groups that support marginalized people, supporting groups or people that support marginalized people. I think that's really important, particularly from people who have privileges that are outside of those marginalized groups or categories, if you like. I say a lot that we all have privileges in certain circles. Sure, some of us may have more privilege than others, and it's really important that we kind of take stock and recognize that. And then if we are able to and have the energy to, and space and resources to utilize whatever privilege or knowledge or, you know, resources, that we may have, to support those groups or shout out those groups. There's groups around the UK that are doing really vital work when it comes to LGBTQ people and faith of various backgrounds and religions, and we can all do something to support them, even if it's resharing a story or retweeting or, you know, whatever that might be. And I think that's really important. So there's something that we can all do. It's not like a passive thing, you know, I don't belong to that group or that struggle isn't mine. You can amplify voices. You can pull up a seat at whatever table that you may have for groups that aren't represented. And I think that's really important. The key message of we can all do something, and should be, whatever that looks like, even if you might think it's a small thing.
Thanks. And Dalia, just to finish on you.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what I've been saying, I've been really thinking about, you know, Jewish LGBT plus young people and people in general, but kind of as Maryam says, for those who may not know the language, we start every KeshetUK session with some ground rules, and one of them is like, use the words that you know, use the words that you've read in the newspaper or heard in a soap or watched on TV, and then we can have a conversation if there are different or better ways to talk about it, but you can't have an educational space if you can't use the words that are in your brain. Saying that, be aware that not every Jewish LGBT plus person, not every LGBT plus person of faith wants to be that educator, right? Being aware of that and having that forethought is really important. But we can't have conversations if you don't use the words that you know. I think in terms of other advice is within within the UK, there are Jewish LGBT plus social groups. So there are groups like Laviot, which is for queer and non-binary women. There's the Jewish LGBT plus group, which is actually one of the oldest LGBT plus social groups, I think, in the country. It's been going a real long time. And there's loads of other kind of social groups, if that's kind of also what you're looking for. But if there's any way that we can help at KeshetUK, if there is a synagogue or a communal organization or a school, like a Jewish school or anything like that, that you've had a conversation with and it hasn't been the kindest, or you feel like there is support that we could be offering, like parts of your community, please let us know. I think over the last few years, the thing that I've been most surprised with, having like started working kind of full time in the Jewish community, is how many people want to have a conversation and they want to start understanding, and they may not always use the right words to begin with, and they may not have always said the right things, but the level of kindness and the level of goodwill has always surprised me, in a way that I'm not sure why it surprised me, but actually it's because I've absorbed some pretty harmful messages as well, and you have to hold that tension and you have to work out how to get through it. And I would say now, being 30, I am so grateful to younger me for holding those two identities, whether they have been intersected at all times or not. Now, them definitely being, a whole person, I'm very grateful for that patience and for understanding that having unkind conversations doesn't mean a kind conversation isn't around the corner. I'm working out how to try and still process some of that pain, but embrace the joy.
Thank you. And I'm just going to finish on 3 points there. One is kind of language that I think you've all spoken about today. And as a comms professional, language is supposed to be my thing, but I'm constantly learning and constantly having to adapt, because there's stuff that, like you both said, all three of you said, we've been taught stuff throughout our lives, and it sticks with us, and you come to think it's the norm, but actually it's about just educating yourself. And if you are comfortable enough to kind of not even challenge, but educate people when they are using the wrong language, it might not be because they're choosing to do so. It might just be because they've not been taught, or they've not had the exposure to some of the language. So I think that's really important. And I think kind of actually there's only my second thing was to thank you all for your time today, because it's been amazing. It's been great. And my last and final words, I promise you, is just going back to self-love. And it's about being a bit more selfish about you, and making the right decisions for you. We live in a society where we always base ourselves against other people and other people's experiences. And actually it's about taking out that time and saying, what is right for me? How do I do that? And it's about educating yourself. It's about talking to people if you're comfortable with that. It's about reaching out to organizations and then making a decision that is the perfect fit for you. And I can appreciate that not all your decisions might not go the right way, but at least you've taken the time out to understand why you did that, and hopefully grown and learn a lot more and become a bit more confident. So that's the end of me waffling on. Just again to say thank you so much. And for everyone watching at home, kind of make sure you visit the Albert Kennedy Trust website, the social media. And if you want to chat to kind of any of the panelists today, I'm sure you'll all be happy to online. So yeah, thank you very much.